So to start us off, probably I want to start by echoing Grant Wiggins' short say that learners need endless feedback and more than they need endless teaching. So when we talk about assessment, what is it, and why is it important for us to design good assessment criteria and give feedback to the students? Now, the term assessment generally refers to all those activities that you as a teacher undertake, and also students are part of this in assessing themselves, or the teacher assessing the students. So this provides information to be used as a feedback to modify the teaching learning activities or processes. So in an e-learning environment, assessment can be defined as the process of assessing or documenting in measurable terms a learner's knowledge, skills, and attitudes, probably through an online method. Assessment are used probably in e-learning courses as a way for you, the educator or the instructor, the person administering the online learning, to identify how well a learner has understood the course content. And therefore, teachers who develop useful assessment criteria provide corrective instructions and give students second chances, are able to demonstrate success and can improve their instruction and help probably students learn, thus ensuring inclusivity, ensuring that SDG 4 is attained, that is inclusive and equitable quality education that promote learning opportunities for all. And therefore, what is this assessment criteria? How can we come up with a good assessment method as a teacher? So going forward, you're going to look into the guiding you as an educator, an assessment criteria, you need to ensure that the assessment is practical, or practicality as a guiding principle in designing assessment refers to the time and the cost constraints during the construction and administration of your assessment. So tests can be either economical, to provide the format of the test should be simple to understand, and moreover, tests should also be able to solve, should be able to be solving a test in the sense that it remains within a suitable time when trying to solve it. And then a test that is practical it's generally simple to administer. You don't have too much hurdles in administering the test, and the test, its assessment procedure should be particular and time efficient. In other words, the time allocated to the test should not be too long for it to beat the logic of having the test. And then you have the guiding principle that we refer to as reliability. What do we mean by a reliable test, or a or assessment? It's a different letter. So if one educator gives a student, therefore there are 4 types of reliability. Reliability is student related, which can be personal, which can be related to, which can be personal problems, sickness, or fatigue. So in this case, in this regard, a student who maybe was sick or fatigued during that test, can that test be able to take consideration of that? And then we have the rater in this case is it's related to, which includes bias and subjectivity. The person marking this test or the examiner, remember, there are those other background issues that might result, maybe biasness due to the educator, or maybe subjectivity. And then reliability with regard to the test administration. This is in this case, the conditions of the test taking process. When the test was being taken, was the environment conducive for taking the test? There are scenarios where maybe when you take a test and maybe there are some loopholes in supervision, then the test fails its reliability criteria, in the sense that maybe students had a way of copying the test or the assessment. And then test related, which is basically related to the nature of the test. How is the test itself? And then the other guiding principle when designing an assessment criteria is validity. Validity basically is the most important criteria for the quality of any given test. So the term validity refers to whether or not the test measures what it claims to measure. So on a test with high validity, the items will be closely linked to the test intended. So validity comes in different forms. We have what we call construct validity, which basically means that does the test measure the concept that it's intended to measure? That's what we mean by construct validity of a test. And then we have the content validity. Is the test fully representative of what it aims to measure? And then we have face validity, which refers to whether as to the content of the test appear to be suitable to its aims. Remember, when you're giving a test or when you're giving an assessment, you have the aim stated out. What is the objective of you giving that test? So does the content of the test appear to be suitable for its aims? And then finally, we have what we call criterion validity with regard to, do the result correspond to a different test of the same thing? And then we have the authenticity, which is another guiding principle in designing an assessment criteria. The assessment instrument is authentic when it is contextualized and contains natural language and meaningful, relevant, and interesting topic that replicates a real-world experiences. So authenticity in this case involves use of testing strategies that do not focus entirely on recalling facts. Instead, they ask students maybe to demonstrate skills and concepts they have learned. So how can you encourage students to apply their knowledge and skills to real-world tasks? Very, very important. Having a real-world representation within the test. And then we have the washback guiding principle. What does washback mean? So this principle refers to the consequence of an assessment on teaching and learning within the classroom. Washback can be positive and negative. Positive washback may refer to the desired effects of a test, while negative washback refers to the negative consequences of the test. So in order to have positive washback, instructional planning is very key. And in this case, when we talk about instructional planning, we are basically looking at the process of the teacher using appropriate curricula or instructional strategies and resources and data-driven decisions during the planning process in order to address the diverse needs of different students. In this case, we say instructional planning. So with these guiding principles in designing a good testing criteria, what then are the different forms of tests? Or what then are the different forms of assessment? So that leads us to a few forms of assessment that we can use in our day-to-day virtual teaching or virtual classroom when we want to test the objectives for the teaching and learning process. So in a nutshell, I'm going to take you through 5 key assessment formats. We have what we call the diagnostic, we have what we call the formative, we have what we call the interim, we have what we call the benchmark, and we have what we call the summative. So the multifaceted nature of assessment means that you, as an educator, can leverage on them in a number of ways so as to provide a valuable formal or informal structure to the learning process. So the main thing is to remember is that the assessment is a learning tool. Assessment is a learning tool. What all assessments have in common is that they provide a snap preview or a snapshot of the student's understanding at a particular time within the learning process, whether it is within the classroom, the 35 minutes that you have, or over a term, or over a year, or over a level, like let's say in primary or upper primary. So assessments basically help you, the educator, to determine what to teach, how to teach, and in the end, how effectively you taught that concept that you intended to teach. So starting us off is diagnostic assessment. When you talk about diagnostic assessment, the word diagnosis in the normal context is basically refers to an analysis of the nature or condition of a situation, which is exactly how you as an educator tend to use such kind of a test. So diagnostic assessments are basically what we call pre-tests. They usually serve as a gauge for how much preloaded information a student has about maybe a topic or a concept or a given knowledge area. So they help us to tell the teacher, and basically the pretest will help to tell the teacher and the students how much they know and don't know about maybe an upcoming topic. For example, let's say you are starting a lesson on two-digit multiplication in mathematics. So to make sure the unit goes smoothly, you as a mathematics teacher, you want to know if your students have mastered what we call fact families, place value, and one-digit multiplication before you move on to more complicated questions on two-digit multiplication. So when you structure a diagnostic assessment around your lesson, you will get the information you need to understand the student's knowledge and engage your whole classroom. And therefore, this helps to inform you as an educator on your lesson planning, your learning objectives, and also identify areas that may need more or less time to spend on. So with this kind of assessment, you as an educator, you can be able to plan meaningful and efficient instruction that can provide students with an individualized learning experience. We are all conversant with what we call individualized education programs. So this pretest can really help you develop IEPs for your learners with different needs who might not necessarily fit into the blanket classroom that you are trying to teach. And then we have the other assessment we refer to as the formative assessment. So the main intent of this formative assessment is to gather insights about a student learning during a unit so that to track the student progress in form of instruction. So this formative assessment is mainly used during the teaching learning process. You don't wait at the end of the term to give it, as we shall see later on in another form of assessment we call summative. So this formative assessment seeks to establish, one, how are the students doing? And two, how are they picking up the information they should be learning? So the formative assessment also provides feedback to you, the teacher, and allowing you to check in on how students are doing. If it is planned very well as a process, the assessment is what we call, it elicits what we call evidence of students' achievement, and therefore it can be used by you as a teacher to adjust your ongoing instructional procedure, or it can also be used by the student to adjust their current learning tactics. Formative assessments usually comprise of key aspects, and some of these key aspects to generally describe what a formative assessment is, we talk of them as being low-stakes assessment, and then the goal of informing the instruction. So you are doing this formative assessment to inform to adjust your instruction method. And then they also help you to gain insight on learning status of the students at any particular time. And then they also help you to identify knowledge retention and understanding. And then they can be administered daily, weekly, or otherwise frequent checks at any given time, maybe within the lesson. And then they are generally short and quick. And then they come in many forms. They could talk of quizzes. They could be exit tickets. It could be a form of artwork, or it could be even a Venn diagram for the students to show relationship. Remember, when you are looking at the TPAC framework, we talked of a Venn diagram integrating the technological content, pedagogical content, knowledge, and all that. So you could even use such, or even gamification in learning, and or maybe you just give a students a task within the week to come up with maybe a presentation on a certain knowledge area. So during this formative assessment, learners are usually allowed to make revisions to their online assignments if you're doing the online assessment, or correct mistakes. Remember, the main goal is to modify their learning behavior. And some examples of formative assessment could include maybe portfolios. We are very familiar with this in CBC, where we are now telling students to be creating portfolios. And we could also have group projects in which maybe you give students work in groups virtually, and maybe using tools like Quest Garden to come up with the presentation slides on the same. And then they could also come in form of progress reports, how the students is coming along in the knowledge gain and retention. Then they could also come in form of class discussions, entry or exit tickets, and or just the short regular quizzes that we normally give. The most suitable tool that we can use now that we've been undergoing through remote learning and remote methodology in e-learning, we have interacted briefly. I know some of you have, but some have not, with what we call Kahoot. Kahoot is basically a software that you can use to assess students online during a virtual classroom, or even Mentimeter. I know you are familiar with what I'm talking about, Kahoot and Mentimeter. So maybe towards the end, if we'll have some time, I'll also take time to take you through Kahoot and Mentimeter to basically cement your knowledge on this. Very powerful open source softwares that you can use to do a virtual assessment. And then we have what we call summative assessment. Typically, a summative assessment is administered at the end of an e-learning course and provides learners with a final grade, in contrast to formative assessment, which identifies areas that may need improvement and pinpoint their strengths during the e-learning process or the course. Summative assessment in e-learning is used to determine whether or not a learner achieved the learning objectives and reached the desired level of proficiency. For example, if a learner passes a summative assessment at the end of an e-learning course, it may earn them a spot in the next e-learning course. When we talk of, let's say, modules, Module 1, Module 2, Module 3. So probably maybe you have your assessment on a learning management system like Moodle, and you have given Module 1 for these students must complete this and attain a certain grade at the end of the module before the Module 2 can open. This is what we mean by a summative assessment. So different types of summative assessments in e-learning exist. And what are some of these examples of summative assessment? So online multiple choice exams, for example, where students must choose from a specific set of answers, where no written responses are required and the answers are typically presented at random. That is what we use that on Mentimeter the other day when you're doing remote methodology in e-learning or in virtual classroom. Then we can talk of also online presentations where learners can create an online presentation that delves into a particular topic which they must then share with their peers or in a public forum. The online presentation shows their mastery of the subject and determines whether they have earned the key concepts and ideas. So when creating a website or maybe a blog, another way of administering a summative assessment, this is a modern twist on online presentation assessment. So instead of the learners doing an online presentation, you can ask them to create maybe a website or to create a blog on this, or such that where the learners are asked to create maybe a site or a blog that covers all aspects of the topic in question. They must put the information they find using their own words and create a design for the site, which also tests their communication and also technological skills. Remember, at any given level, when you're talking of integration of ICT and use of ICT resources, more emphasis should not be on the teacher. Rather, the emphasis should be on the learner. Can the learner use this ICT equipment well? Those tablets that we have in those schools, when you give them to learners, can the learners navigate through the URLs and search for information, group the information, and have some meaningful report coming out of it? Or all through it's you, the teacher, who is guiding the learners on what to do each and every time? Sometimes it's important to give those learners the freedom to interact with those resources, so that at the end of the day, the use of ICT and integration in classroom is more to be learner-centered and not teacher-centered. And then we can also have other form of summative assessment, what we call learners' online portfolios. We have been drafting portfolios in our respective classes, especially the grade 4s and grade 5. I don't know if grade 1 to 3 are making portfolios, but now you're shifting this, what you call the portfolio, where they have these files and putting in everything that they are making. Now you're putting it into a digital format, what you call an online portfolio. So throughout the e-learning course, learners are asked maybe to place important online assignments and e-learning activities into an online portfolio, which is then assessed. And at the end of the term, the teacher or the educator or the facilitator of that e-learning program can be able to assess the learners and award grades. They can also create an online portfolio comprised of entirely new work that is being used to determine their final grade. And then we have another form of summative assessment we can call online group projects, where learners work in their peers to complete an online group project that showcases their comprehension and skill mastery. For example, they might create a slideshow that highlights the key takeaways from the e-learning course, or even create a web quest, or create a photo story. We talked about photo story last week. They can create a photo story and be able to upload it somewhere on a lesson, on learner management system, on learning management system, where they can be graded. So what tips can we use when probably maybe you want to use assessment rubrics, for example? Assessment rubrics, when you are talking of a rubric, we were able to take you through what a rubric looks like in the first module when you are doing, when you are talking about planning your lesson. I showed you what a rubric looks like. But when students are, when you want to give an assessment, it's important as an educator, you to create or make a rubric. Students always do their best work when they know what is expected of them and how they'll be marked or graded out of it. So when you're giving an assessment, tell these students the expectations of the assessment and how it will be graded. The easiest way of doing this is basically doing what you call, making what you call an assessment rubric. So before giving your learners their assessment, make sure that they know what it will cover and how it will be graded. So a rubric should have basically a detailed breakdown of all the project's individual parts, what is required of each group member, and an explanation of what will be poor, passable, good, or excellent work. So a well-crafted rubric lets maybe multiple teachers in the same department or in the same faculty or in the same subject grade the same assignment and arrive at the same mark. That is a well-crafted rubric. It is so important part of assessment that the teacher or the students need to take responsibility for quality of their work. So if learners have no clear idea of what they need to do and what knowledge they need to acquire or pass on their online exam, they cannot possibly prepare for the challenge. This also increases their stress levels, which prevents them from performing to the best of their ability. So in coming up with a rubric, what are the main parts of a rubric that in any case you want to make one, you should consider? A rubric has basically about 4 or 5 main parts. So showing on your slides, we have, just a minute. I hope my screen is still visible on your end, Kiko.
Yes, it's all visible, Maxwell.
Thank you so much. So that's a sample of a rubric part. So I want to take you through the different parts of the rubrics. So the rubric will have what we call a task descriptor, or basically, let me start by the criteria part. The criteria part is a part that comes in form of rows. So this part, for example, the criteria for this rubric is the participation. We want to grade participation. Maybe it was a group work. So you've given these students a task to come to discuss something and come up with a report, maybe. So in the group work, you want to assess a criteria that we call participation. So that criteria participation, along the row, we have the first column, actively involved, shows enthusiasm and engagement, is punctual or supports others, shows initiative and volunteers, gets excellent. The last column, which talks of fail, non-submission or plagiarism. Maybe this group did not do any research, or they never did any findings. They copied or they never submitted. So this criteria on participation is an important part that the learner should know. When you're going to do that assessment, you're going to do that assignment, I will be able to grade your individual participation as a member of that group. Then we have what we call the task. The task is basically the title. We have what we call the task. The task is basically the title, where probably you are describing the project or the assessment that is required. So in this regard, in our rubric that is showing on your screen, our task will be essential parts of our rubric. So maybe you've given these students an assessment or an assignment to go maybe and research on parts of a tree or parts of a plant. So that becomes the task. And then we have what we call the level of mastery, or what we call the columns, the scale. So the scale in this case, a scale of points, we have excellent, we have good, we have satisfactory, we have marginal pass, and we have the fail. And then we have, of course, the value. Yeah. So the value in this case is a 4 for excellent, a 3 for good, a 2 for satisfactory, a 1 for marginal pass, and a 0 for fail. You could vary that. You could even use grades now. An excellent A, an excellent B, or satisfactory C, and so forth and so forth. And then the descriptors. The descriptors are what describes the criteria. So for a student to get satisfactory, the descriptor is occasionally involved and engaged, little enthusiasm, needs constant guiding or prompting. That is a descriptor for which criteria? Participation criteria. So the descriptor basically is what gives flesh to the criteria so that this student can get a value for that particular rubric. But to make your work easier as an educator, sometimes designing good quality rubrics can be very time involving. So it is always important to adapt rubrics. Use the online education resources that we talked about. There are already rubrics that have been designed out there. What you can basically find it from the internet. Of course, those under what we call the Creative Commons license, and you can be able to use such rubrics. adapt them to a different classroom scenario. So what tips can we have in coming up with good quality rubrics? Determine the type of rubric you'd wish to use, holistic or analytic. An analytic rubric presents a description of each level of achievement for each criterion and provides a separate score for each criterion. That's what we've just seen. A holistic rubric, on the other hand, presents basically a description of each level of achievement and provides a single score based on an overall impression of the student's performance on a given task. I'll be able to share with you links so that for further to enhance learning beyond this training, you go and look at more examples of holistic and analytic kind of rubrics. And then you can also identify what you want to assess. This form of criteria for assessment, you are usually part of the description of the assignment or task. And then identify the characteristics to be rated, that is the rows, specify the skills, the knowledge, and or behaviors that you will be looking out for. Limit the characteristics to those that are most important to the assessment. Don't overpopulate your rubric, it will lose meaning. And then you need to identify the levels of mastery, in this case, the scale, the columns. In this case, if it's excellent, satisfactory, and all that, or good, better, best, and all that. The main part that you need to consider, the main point you need to consider all in identifying the levels of mastery, aim for an even number. In this case, I could recommend 4, because when you use an odd number, is the middle tends to probably maybe the middle tends to have odd numbers that might not give you, you might not be able to break at highway, yeah? And then you also need to describe each level of mastery for each characteristic cell. So the descriptor, what is describing the criteria? If it is participation, did the learner participate fully? That's what you call the descriptor. So describe the best work you could expect using this characteristic. This describes the top category. And then describe an unacceptable product. This describes the lowest category, and then develop descriptions of intermediate level such that you have the descriptors grading value either increasing or decreasing. And then focus your descriptions on the presence of the quantity and quality that you expect rather than on the absence of them. However, at the lowest level, it will be appropriate to state that an element is lacking or absent. Yeah, for example, in just previous example we looked at, a student who does not submit maybe a presentation, that is the lowest level, which means he gets a 1. I don't always encourage zeros. At least the lowest level should be a 1. Don't use a 0. Then keep the elements of the description parallel from performance levels to performance level. In other words, if your descriptors include quantity, clarity, and details, make sure that each of these outcome expectations is included in each performance level descriptor. And then try out the rubric. Trying out the rubric is what we call the testing or the piloting. Apply the rubric to an assignment, share with colleagues, maybe faculty members or members of the same subject or in the same department, to see if this rubric can establish the minimum score needed for a student work to be deemed passable. So for example, maybe you want to, members of the subjects may decide that 1 or 2 on a 4-point scale, 4 is exemplary, 3 is proficient, 2 is marginal, and maybe 1 is unacceptable, does not meet the minimum quality expectations. So they may set their criteria for success as 90% of the students must score 3 or higher. If assessment study results fall short, action will need to be taken. And then, of course, discuss with colleagues and review feedback and revise. And it's important when developing a rubric for a program assessment, enlist the help of colleagues. Very important. Collaboration is very important, colleagues. Teachers, you don't be entangled in your own cocoon. Seek out peer reviews, even in your classroom, in your virtual classroom, invite another colleague of yours to be part of that classroom for peer review and giving feedback. It's important. It always improves our instructional method. Rubrics promote shared expectations and grading practices, which benefit all members of the subject and even the students within the program. So having looked at the rubrics, it's important for us to analyze results. Analysis or analyzing results of assessment is key to identify trends and areas of improvement. So the purpose of maybe a summative assessment in e-learning is twofold. First, it lets learners know where they stand in terms of their academic progress and proficiency. And it also allows them to progress to the next e-learning course, as it proves they have acquired a sufficient amount of knowledge to progress to the next level. Secondly, summative assessment results give e-learning professionals the ability to identify trends and weaknesses of the e-learning course itself, as well as learner areas that may need improvement or those difficult to understand areas. So for example, if a vast majority of your learners are able to pass the summative test at the end of the module, you may want to modify your e-learning content and instructional strategy to improve knowledge retention and comprehension. Summative assessments in e-learning will always give you invaluable data that you can use to improve your e-learning course for the next group of learners, as well as to create an individualized plan of action that can help your current learners. And then thirdly, diversify your assessment method. Use wide range of assessments to cater to for different learning styles. So every learner, remember, is unique. They each have different learning needs and require different learning materials and e-learning activities to absorb information effectively. This is why it is essential to offer them a variety of assessment types when creating your e-learning assessment strategy. Some learners may need some interactive assessments, such as maybe scenarios or simulations, to effectively gauge their proficiency, while others may not have maybe the language or communication skills required for an essay-based exam. So do some research beforehand to see which type of assessment are best for your learners and which will most accurately assess their skills and knowledge base. So if possible, include a good mix of summative assessment types into your e-learning course to cater to a wide range of learners' preferences and styles. Use this summative assessment guide to test the proficiency of your current learners and improve your instructional strategy for those who will follow. And then keep in mind that summative assessment does not provide learners with timely feedback they can use to improve their learning behavior. As such, pairing them with formative assessment is usually the ideal solution, because, for example, if you're giving an end-of-term exam or end-of-term cut, they'll need to wait for, let's say, 3 to 4 days before you mark, enter the marks into maybe an exam system and give them feedback. But for formative, remember, it is instantaneous. You are assessing the learners during the learning process. So it's always important to have a hybrid of both summative and formative assessment. And then fourthly, you need to distinguish between formative and summative assessment. So distinguishing between these two, it's important to know the difference between the two core, I call them core modes of assessment, when you are developing your e-learning assessment strategy, since they serve two completely different purposes. Remember, we said a formative assessment is designed to track learners' progress along the way and to provide feedback. And in addition, during a formative assessment, learners are usually allowed to make revisions to their online assignments or correct mistakes, as the main goal is to modify their learning behaviors. On the other hand, a summative assessment is final. Learners are not able to make changes to their online assignments, and all tests or exams are designed to determine their mastery or proficiency. Essentially, a formative assessment is about the process of creating a finished product, whereas a summative assessment is the finished product itself. On to the fourth type of assessment. I had to take more time on formative assessment and summative assessment, because this is what we mainly use at our own levels in our teaching. So it's important for us to have a clear understanding of these two forms of assessment. Another form of assessment, we call it the adaptive assessment model. An adaptive assessment model can be defined as any type of assessment that is tailored specifically to each learner or child or student based on their performance on the previous items on the assessment. Most adaptive assessments are based on the theories and advances of what we call the item response theory. If you find some time, go through it. It's a very elaborate way of understanding adaptive testing, the item response theory. So more specifically, in this theory, the learner's ability the learner's ability estimates, as well as item characteristics such as the item difficulty, are placed on the same what we call continuum. So this allows for the administration of items that are matched to the estimated ability level of each learner at each point of assessment. Therefore, adaptive assessment will always allow for the administration of items that are targeted to the ability or level of each learner, which enables the estimation for more accurate learner ability estimates. More examples, or a more elaborate example of adaptive testing is what we call a computer adaptive testing, CAT. A computer adaptive testing, sorry about that. A computer adaptive testing is simply an adaptive assessment that is administered on a computer. Yeah, it is a test that it's an adaptive test that is designed to adjust the level of difficulty based on the responses provided. So they use a lot of what we call algorithms and artificial intelligence and machine learning to tailor make these adaptive tests to match the knowledge and ability of the test taker or the learner. For example, if a learner's response in an example of an adaptive test, if a learner's responds correctly to item 1, their estimated ability will increase. So the second item that will be administered will be of a higher difficulty level than the first item. If the learner responds incorrectly to item 2 or question 2, the learner's estimated ability will drop slightly, so that the third item that will be given to this learner will have a level of difficulty in between the first question that the learner answered correctly and the second question that the learner did not answer correctly. So by administering more items that are specifically targeted to each learner's ability, a more accurate ability estimate is achieved. Adaptive assessment comes in contrast to linear or non-adaptive assessments, where all learners respond to the same or equivalent forms of tests in a predetermined order. One problem with non-adaptive assessments, what we are used to, for example, those exams you give in class, the problem is that the majority of the items are administered are targeted to the learners in the middle of the ability continuum or scale. Therefore, linear tests typically include a large number of items of average difficulty and a few items of lower and of higher difficulty. This creates problems for the accurate estimation of examinees at the extreme end of the ability continuum. So that is it with the adaptive testing. I know those of you who've done some online exams, for example, if you're doing a foreign TOEFL exams, or maybe GRE exams, or maybe what we call the IELTS exams, they use a lot of computer adaptive testings, so that every time you answer a question, they bring you a question of a difficulty level that is of more difficulty than the one you answered correctly. So that is basically what computer adaptive testing. I'll also share with you a link on this so that you go and find out more information about computer adaptive testing. So what are the pros and cons of this kind of testing? Some of the advantages of adaptive assessments are those of increased measurement accuracy. for learners at all ranges of ability continuum, and item efficiency, since fewer items are needed to reach the same level of accuracy as with linear tests. And then additional advantages of adaptive assessment when they are administered electronically, for example, the computer adaptive test, those of immediate scoring and reporting and more frequent test administrations. So the learner is able to get feedback immediately when he gives the correct answer or the wrong answer. Disadvantages here could be, they are very expensive. The initial cost of creating and calibrating large item pools that are needed for such assessment is very costly. Because remember, I'm talking of you need some complex codes, programming and artificial intelligence algorithms, so that this test is valid. And then the inability of the learners to go back and maybe change their answers on most adaptive assessments can create anxiety and frustrations, because once you answer the question, it disappears. You get another question. That can cause anxiety and or maybe frustrations. And then the security issues, of course, related to the compromise of the item pool due to the overexposure of some items. So you find that over time, when these tests have been administered for a long time, there's the danger of the questions being predictable, and this might render the validity of such a test low. So how then can you be able to create digital quizzes for your courses? Quite a number of softwares that you can use. We have what we call the class marker, Raptivity, EXT Learning, FlexiQuiz, and Propoffs. These are free softwares that if you go online and search for them, you can comfortably be able to create. You can comfortably be able to create these lessons for these quizzes for your online assessment. And therefore, how do we map your assessment with the cognitive skill framework? Remember what we talked about Bloom's taxonomy some times back? I'll be able to share this link for you to use. Let me just load it so that I can be able to show you what I mean. It is. So let me show you what I mean when you map when you're mapping all these assessments to the Bloom's taxonomy framework. So for instance, remember when you are looking at the Bloom's taxonomy, we said the lower levels are remembering, understanding, then the upper level starts on applying, analyzing, evaluation, and creating cognitive skills. So for example, in the remembering level, you want to attest, can the students recall or remember the information? So the verb here is recall, recognize, and identify. So what appropriate assessment, examples of appropriate assessments in this would be objective test items such as fill in the blank, matching the letters, label or multiple choice questions that require students to recall or recognize terms, facts, and concepts. For example, in preschool, where they are given different pictures to match. For example, a table and a chair, a plate and a spoon. You see, so the learner in this case is able to recall that when you have a plate, something related to a plate must be a spoon. Or when you have a table, something related to a table must be a chair. So because of the interest of time, I think Vida will be able to give us this in our chat in our chat group, so that we can go thoroughly through it on how you can map your assessments on Bloom's taxonomy. Then that brings us to a recap for today's session. What was so important today is to gauge the diagnostic assessment, where we looked at how to gauge the pre-knowledge, what does the learner know prior to the lesson. Then for formative assessment, to gather insight about student learning during a unit. so as to track the student progress and inform instruction, summative assessment, and adaptive assessment. So with that, we come to the end of this session. And I want to push it back to Vida. If you're in the house, if there are any questions, probably 1 or 2 minutes, I can take them on as we wind up. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much to Mr. Maxwell. At this point, I'll leave it to the team. If you have any questions, you can be able to ask. I can see one, so maybe Kiko can unmute the participants. We have Mary Muiruri, yeah, from Eldonio, Nakuru.
Hi, Teacher Mary, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hello.
Hello, Teacher Mary, I can hear you clearly.
I want you to recap on adaptive assessment. Hello?
Yes, Teacher Mary.
Yes.
Hello? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you, Teacher Mary.
I'm requesting that you take us through briefly on adaptive assessment.
I think if I can get that clearly, she wants some more information on adaptive assessment. As I said earlier on, that this is a kind of a more complex assessment that will require a lot of input on programmers, where you need to devise algorithms or what I can call procedures that the computer can use to assess the learner and give feedback. And other than that, the computer can also be able to select questions for the learner depending on the level of proficiency of this learner. For example, if the first question was 1 + 1 in mathematics, and the learner writes 2. So the computer will gauge these are learner who can quickly add 1-digit numbers. So the next question, it will try to give this learner addition of maybe 2-digit numbers. Let's say 20 + 20. So if this learner writes 12, then it will know that this learner cannot be able to add 2-digit numbers together. So the third question will be a hybrid to this learner. It will maybe give this learner a question that requires the learner to add a 2-digit number to a 1-digit number. For example, now 10 + 1. So every time this learner answers a question, the background algorithms can be able to detect very fast how did the learner answer that question, correctly or wrongly. What time did he take maybe even to answer the question? Then the next question is an assessment based on how the learner answered the previous question. But it's the best way of giving an assessment because it enhances, it gives feedback to the learner individualized instead of what we are used to, that question 1 was not done very well, without knowing whether this learner really understood the concept of addition or not. Yes, Teacher Mary, have I answered your question?
I have an idea now of what.
Yes.
You.
Karibu.
Yeah. So just to add on that, Teacher Mary, once you have access to the Angaza Elimu platform, that's the implementation that we've done. As I mentioned earlier on in one of the trainings that I did on Bloom's taxonomy, that's the type of adaptive assessments that you'll find on the Angaza Elimu platform. So you'll be able to show and have a great experience on the platform on the assessments. Listen, thank you for that. We do have Ganja Joel, you go ahead and unmute yourself. Teacher Ganja Joel. He's unmuting himself. We have a teacher with Techno Pop 4. If you could go ahead and unmute yourself. Techno Pop 4.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yes, I was asking about the data adaptive assessment, but it has been clarified.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you so much. I think we will be able to share more details on that on the adaptive assessments. And as I just said, for you to have a good experience on the Angaza Elimu platform once you have the access.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You're most welcome. Shalea Mutai, you could go ahead and unmute yourself. Lea Mutai. I see your hand is up. You just go ahead and unmute yourself, Lea Mutai.
Okay, thank you. I was not raising the hand. Hello.
Hello, we can hear you, Lea Mutai.
I want to say thank you. In fact, I didn't want to raise the hand. I wanted to write a chat. Unfortunately, that I find my hand is up. Let me say thank you, Mr. Maxwell, for your good lesson. Keep it up.
Thank you for the feedback, Lea Mutai. We appreciate you. Teacher Veronica Anyango, if you could go ahead and unmute yourself. Teacher Veronica, we can't hear you. I think you're trying to speak, but we can't hear you. Maybe you can just type on the chat. Teacher with the device 165726. 165726. You could just go ahead and unmute yourself.
Oh, did we?
Hello.
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you, teacher.
Thank you for the session. It was wow. It was wonderful.
You're most welcome. We appreciate the feedback.
Okay.
Teacher Richard Ogege, you could go ahead and unmute yourself. Teacher Richard Ogege, kindly unmute yourself. Teacher Munguti, if you could go ahead and unmute yourself. Teacher Munguti. Yes, Teacher Munguti, kindly go ahead and speak. I see you are unmuted.
Lower hand. I've lowered my hand.
Oh, okay. Do you want to speak right now?
Hello?
Hello, Teacher Richard.
As the session was okay, though it reaches a point where now we not get what you were saying.
Sorry?
Hello?
Yes, I can hear you right now.
Is I'm saying
Yes.
it started, but still a point where now we were not able to get the voice from your end.
Oh,
I would
okay.
request you to work on your.
Oh, okay. Thank you for that feedback, Teacher Richard.
Welcome.
Teacher Mungoti, you could go ahead maybe and type. Teacher Veronica too. Teacher Veronica, if you could go ahead and unmute yourself. I think maybe you both having issues with connections. Maybe if you just type on the chat. Vida, do you have more questions on? Teacher Fatih here, Hussein, could go ahead and unmute yourself. Teacher Fatih here.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening too. How are you?
I'm fine.
Okay.
It was such a wonderful session. I'm happy to have learned quite a lot. My question is on the rubric. Am I supposed to make a rubric for each and every subject, or per lesson, or per substrand?
Yeah.
Hello?
Yes, I got your question.
Yeah.
So when you are designing your online class, for instance,
Yes.
maybe you have given learners a task to go and maybe come with a portfolio, for example, or go and research on the internet on maybe a few on a what you intended to. So when you are making a, you'll be maintaining that you have given Anna to go and find more information. But even before they go and find it out, take time to take the learners through the task ahead, be able to award or once they have completed that task. So a rubric is always for every task that you do, not subject or per the learning aid.
You've gone off air.
I'm saying that it's a bit of background. I hope I'm audible from my end. Kiko, confirm?
Yes, yes, you could go ahead, Mr. Maxwell.
I was saying that when you're preparing a rubric is specific to the learning area that you want the learners to complete the task on. So it is not a blanket tool for like a whole subject, no. When you give a task in a certain area, that's when you prepare a rubric that you want to assess the learners on how they handle the task that you have given unto them. And I've said, when you make that rubric, take the learner through it first before they go to start on the tasks that you have given them or on the assignment that you've given them. So that when they'll be doing that assignment, they have in mind that my teacher said that I'll be assessed on maybe the number of resources or the number of pictures I gathered for my portfolio, How accurate are they? Did I make any write-up on them? How well did I pre-organize my work? That's all.
Hello, Teacher Fatia. We managed to answer your question. Hi, Teacher Fatia.
Hi, I'm answered.
Great, you most welcome.
I've got whatever you've explained to me. Yeah, I'm answered. Sorry, I'm answered.
Okay.
Are we communicating?
Yes, we can hear you. Great, thank you.
Yes, I'm saying.
Yes.
I've been answered my question. Thank you very much.
You're most welcome.
Have a blessed day.
You too.
Thanks.
Teacher Mary, I see your hand is up. You could go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hello.
Yes, hello, we can hear you.
Yeah, we were trying to use the PPA's tablets. Hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
How can we use the PPA's tablet with such a link so that maybe we can be able to use to share with that stuff with the staff?
So I think I lost you to the last bit on using the people's tablets.
The PPA's tablets.
Yes.
How do we put the links that we can be able to use next time? That's
Or next time, eh? Sorry, I didn't get the last part, Teacher Mary.
I'm asking.
Yes.
We wanted to use the pupils tablet. Hello.
Yes, I can hear you now.
I tried to put the pin and everything else, but couldn't work.
Oh, for the accounts that we shared.
Yeah.
To access the Angaza Elimu platform.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I think we'll not feedback. Maybe could not, and we'll give you feedback on the same.
Okay.
Yes, so she'll be able to get back to you on that.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. It was a good presentation. We are happy.
You're most welcome.
Hi, thank you.
Maybe we can take the last question from Teacher Munguti. You could now, I think, you can unmute yourself. Can still barely hear you, Teacher Munguti. Vida, do we have more questions on the chat before we close the session? Hi, Caspar. We have a guest today. Caspar, do you want to mention something to the teachers?
Hi, Kiko. What is your question again?
If you wanted to mention something to the teachers, maybe on the session and anything on the training.
I don't want to. Well, I don't want to add anything, but I think that the overview was very helpful, and it is the work that I've been working as well in Amsterdam, and the distinction between formative and summative assessment, I think, is very relevant. So I very much agree with the speaker on how to perform that and how to do that and how to use them in the classroom. So I don't have anything to add apart from my compliments for the presenter. Thank you so much, Kiko.
You're most welcome. Thank you for coming too. Vida, do you have more questions in the chat? I think with that, then should be able to close the session for today. So once again, thanks all for coming. We'll be able to get in touch on the communications on the accounts used on the platform and for the next assessment, for the next tasks after the training. And we still continue with the onboarding of the students and looking forward to supporting you further. So once again, thank you so much for coming. And looking forward to hosting you next Monday on Pillar 4 on collaborations in classrooms. So thank you so much and have a great afternoon and evening.